All right, so I'm Stacy Spriggs. I'm the Gardens Program Coordinator here at IFAS Extension, Sarasota County. And along with Dr. Pat Williams, we're going to give you some basic information today about the seed library located in Extension's lobby here at Twin Lakes Park. We're providing this as a training for master gardeners here working at the plant clinic specifically at Twin Lakes Park. This might be a resource that we are able to expand out to other locations in the future, but for now we're just starting it at this specific site. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction into the project, this came about because last year, 2016, we did a community garden member survey, and fortunately, the vast majority of the members were highly satisfied with the program, but one of the opportunities for improvement that they identified was a more formalized way to exchange seeds with one another. People are just kind of meeting out of the garden sheds whenever they see each other and swapping seeds. You know, if somebody has tomatoes and they want cantaloupe and vice versa, then they might exchange seeds very informally that way. But we wanted to do a more organized effort and know what's available out there and be able to steer people to the single source. So I started looking around at other programs in the area and found a couple of seed libraries operating in Pinellas County at public libraries at Dunedin and Safety Harbor. So this program is modeled after those seed libraries, and that's what we're calling it, is a seed library. Excuse me. So we hope that this will become a resource that not just community garden members are utilizing, but of course the entire community. Anyone that comes in the door here at Twin Lakes Parks is welcome to use it as a resource. The project falls under our One Seed program, which is intended to be a shared edible growing experience. It builds community around food, and again, it's open to anyone, open to the public. The effort includes classes, seed saving, seed distributions, recipes, growing tips, and more. And it highlights a particular edible plant each year. And this year, the voted winner was broccoli. So that's one of the items that we'll be sure to include in the seed library this season. So a little bit about procedures. How does it work? We'll try to walk you through this step by step from the seeds coming in the front door and then going back out again. First, the hours advertised for this coincide with the plant clinic hours at Twin Lakes Park because we're counting on you as the master gardeners to handle most of the interactions associated with this. We doubt that it will generate a large volume of traffic here in the office, but we certainly do hope that it will grow in popularity over time. When someone comes in the front door with a bag or an envelope and they're eyeballing that seed catalog, you might just start by asking them if they have seeds that they want to exchange or how you can help them, and then direct them to this blue box that should stay stationed at the seed library on an ongoing basis. They can deposit their seeds into this box and then we'll catalog them at a later date. And then they're free to just look through the catalog drawers and decide which couple packets they would like to take home with them. They should fill out the information card, which looks like this. And they should provide us with as much detail as possible so that we can identify the seeds that they brought into us. You know, it's really easy to tell a carrot seed from a watermelon seed, but not so easy to tell broccoli from cabbage. So I'll let Pat get into that a little bit more as he takes over in a couple minutes. So following that, they are welcome to browse through the drawers and take a couple packets. They may or may not have general questions on how to plant them successfully. You can respond to that to the best of your ability and provide EDIS publications to go home with them. So that's the gist of how we expect most of the interactions to happen. There are a few further protocols to consider. We'll be keeping an inventory so we know which varieties people are most interested in and which dates the items were received on. The log and other resources are found in this binder, a green binder that will live at the plant clinic desk here at Twin Lakes Park. That binder also contains labels. We're able to process the labels here in-house, and you just need to let me or someone else here in the office know when you need more of a certain type of label so that we can get those printed out for you. In general, when we're getting low on certain types of varieties, or we know that we want something specific, then we can send out an email blast to all the master gardeners as an appeal for donations, if you will. And though we would like to keep everything restocked as much as possible, it's important to keep in mind that this project is largely dependent upon donations. So what comes in the door is what we're able to hand back out. The general rule of thumb is going to be 20 seeds per packet, and that may or may not make sense for every type of seed that comes in, so we may have to reevaluate that as we go. But in general, we want to see about 20 seeds per packet, so you'll have a good opportunity to have some germination. And one of the premises of this project is that as individuals, we don't typically need to plant 200 lettuce plants or 500 broccoli plants, which is what the seed packet might contain. So rather than sticking them on a shelf and letting them expire as the germination rate goes down, or just throwing them away so they end up in the landfill, we can share them with others through the seed library. So we want to provide an appropriate number of seeds rather than passing along 100 seeds, divide that quantity up to let more people take advantage of it. And again, if you have questions about whether 20 is the right number to provide, just feel free to ask us. And the next point is what's allowed versus what's not allowed. No nuisance species, no invasive species, nothing not allowed by local law enforcement. While we're primarily focused on edibles, we also accept flowers and pollinators. And aside from that, we don't currently have any restrictions, which might change over time as needed. But for now, we want to get our cabinet stocked up and fully functional. Surplus seeds. You might ask, what if we get a donation of 5,000 seeds? Is that too many? Surely we won't use all of them in 1 year, but we don't want to discard them, don't throw them away. Instead, we want to pass them along to community garden members, potential food bank projects, school gardens. So don't toss them, just give them to us and we'll figure out what to do with them from there. Another possibility is send them along to the plant cell so that master gardeners can grow them for that purpose. The goal is to not waste anything that comes through us. And on the other hand, if we're running low on supplies, which we expect to happen with popular varieties like tomatoes, then we might need to limit it to only allowing 1 packet per customer of that particular type while supplies last. Other supplies to consider, we're looking into getting pharmacy counting tray to make life easier for packaging up all these little seeds, and also a funnel. If there are any other items that you think would make this process go easier, again, feel free to talk with us about it. And now I'll hand the mic over to Dr. Pat Williams, who's going to give you some information about saving seeds in general. And again, feel free to ask us if you have questions. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm the second half of the tag team today. And I think as we approach the seed library, as we initially start, people are going to want seeds. And I see as this evolves, people are going to ask, how can I save seeds to make the seed bank a better exchange? And that's really where I'm going to focus on today a little bit more. The first thing we want to talk about is what we call trueness to type. And that just means that the seed I plant is the plant I'm going to get. And there's a lot of different factors that come into play with that. First thing, as we start to educate the public through our presentations, is to really encourage to do a garden planting plan. And that's the easiest way to keep track. To do a diagram, and as they get all their seed packets, whether they're coming from a store-bought purchase, and that's the easiest way to mark down all the information, or if they're getting seeds from us, to at least that first time write down what they want. Because we all think we're going to remember, and sometimes we put that little tag in the ground and it's never going to disappear, and it's gone within 2 weeks because the bird stole it or something like that. For consideration, we have to look at a few different items. Whether the plant is self-pollinating or cross-pollinating, whether they're annuals, biennials, or perennials, and how we want to really save the seed. If you start to come in with the premise of saving your seed, we will have some really good books here. This one's on seed garden with that whole emphasis of saving the seed that we're planting. So as we get going with that, and we look at, well, what does it make the difference whether it's self-pollinating or cross-pollinating? Well, by definition, self-pollinating will pollinate itself. But even with things like peas and beans, it's possible that there could be an insect that's there. One could crawl in to the almost open flower before it self-pollinates and crosses it. When we talk about pollination, we talk about a term called isolation. So when things are cross-pollinated, meaning insects like bees and flies and other beetles are coming in order to be true to type, we almost have to have 800 to 1,600 feet in between species. And where this comes in to a big play, especially with things like peppers, if the gardener is growing bell peppers and say a chili pepper, the likelihood of those crossing in their 10 by 20 garden is almost 100%. Which means when they bring that in, we really can't say that's a bell pepper, or we really can't say that's a cayenne pepper, because the seeds that are going to come out may be two different things. So as we start to educate people for seed saving, I think it's imperative that we say, well, if you really want to make sure that this is the only pepper you get, that you need to grow one variety for the year, or grow them at different times as they come out. When we start looking at saving seed, this is the ultimate goal of any plant. So in order for the plant to produce a viable, that means a seed that's going to grow later on, seed, it takes a tremendous amount of energy. When we look at an annual, its whole purpose is to produce and falter by the end of the growing season. One of the advantages we have would say a perennial. So let's go to a tomato. If I really wanted to save seeds for a tomato, and this is what I've done in the past, is probably about the third or fourth tomato that I have on the vine, I leave it. I've already tasted the first couple to make sure that's the taste I want. And then, because the plant is healthy and vigorous, I let that one fruit mature, start to wrinkle, and even for the case of the tomato, dry on the vine. And at the point where it's kind of papery, I pull it off. Now, if this is at the end of the season and I want to save my tomatoes, then the seed becomes much harder to clean, because I almost have to go through fermenting to get the seed to be clean. So one of the things we need to look at with our audience is how they really want to do this. If they're going to be part of the seed exchange, then we want good seed to come back in. If it's an annual, the easiest way really is to kind of forget about the plant in the garden and let it do its natural thing. At that point here, with the gardening season being a little off, as the warmer months start to come for April and May, if they just left that plant in there and went out and gathered the fruit after they were well matured and dried, that would be an easier way. If we start looking at biennials, and by definition a biennial is something that's going to need some type of an environmental influence before it's going to produce. We've all had the lettuce in the garden, and it starts to get warm, and we go to pick the leaves off, and it tastes really bitter, and at that point we say, I can't eat this anymore. Well, it's nearing that stage where it's going to bolt. Bolting is a term of flowering for biennials. So if you ever have your cabbage or your lettuce start to grow a tall stalk, that's the flowering stalk. At that point, the plant's not going to produce any more for the consumer to eat, and it's not going to take up any more space in the garden, so they can let it bolt and collect seeds. Now, some of the other biennials, such as cauliflower and broccoli, where that plant may take up a couple square feet in the garden during the gardening season, in order for that to really mature and bloom, that one plant may end up taking up 4 or 6 feet in the garden, because as that broccoli or that cauliflower spreads out, it will get fairly big. Now also at this point, it's not a very attractive plant. And if we're looking at Florida gardening, that means we've got a larger, uglier plant coming into the summer months. So it really depends on if they're interested in saving the seed, they're going to have to make that sacrifice. With the perennials that we've been talking about, and even with some of the herbs, we can harvest along that time. I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is basil, and we know if we are not deadheading and we let the flowers go to seed, then the plant is going to take a downward turn as far as flavor. I think with me, with basil, I'm really gung-ho early on, and by the time I've made pesto and eaten it with every meal, I don't worry about that last 3-4 weeks, and it naturally starts to go to seed. Realizing it once it goes to seed, it's just a matter of letting it do what it's going to do. So part of what we need to educate is just how to produce a good seed. People think that if I pick that bell pepper when it's nice and firm, and I've got those seeds on the inside that are white and having started to change color, those are not viable. So we have to let them know that to clean those seeds out and dry them and put them in an envelope aren't going to do the next person any good when they come for the exchange. So part of it is really instilling what is a mature seed. I think as we get toward the project of bringing seeds into exchange, is we have to have good seed that's not only viable, but we want them to be clean. And there are different ways to clean seeds. I'm sure all of you as kids, this was the day before we weren't allowed to carve pumpkin because knives were dangerous, and nowadays they paint them, but we all harvested pumpkin seeds. And I don't care how many times you tried to clean them before you baked them in the oven, they still had orange stuff all over them. If we don't clean off all of the fruit remnants, then we have the chance of bacteria and other things getting in, or fungal organisms decomposing that last little bit of fruit. So no matter what cleaning mechanism they take, we want to make sure that it's produced and clean. Now, we also know that seeds need moisture to germinate, and it's important for people to realize that as soon as the seeds are clean, that they have to dry them. There are different ways to dry. I find the easiest way is just to spread them out on a paper towel and let them air dry. But kind of keep turning them so they don't stick to the paper towel. Depending when they're going to package them up and bring them in, they need to be keeping the seeds separate. As Stacy mentioned, if you can tell the difference between cauliflower and broccoli and kohlrabi and Brussels sprouts, then you're doing a really good job, because they all look the same. Size and slight color, but if they're mixed, you would never be able to get them out of the same packet. So we have to let people know to really keep things separate when they're cleaning. And then, depending on when they're going to bring them into exchange, the gardeners may think, well, I got my seeds last fall, so I will keep my seeds now and then take them to the extension office in the fall. If they're going to do that, they have to store them. Once they're clean, the easiest way that I've always found is just to put them in an envelope and kind of seal them. At that point, they really need colder temperatures, refrigerator cold temperatures, but the problem with refrigerators is they also have humidity in there, and so you need some type of a drying agent. Some of the pamphlets will talk about using the silica gel for drying flowers. What I always did was just put some shredded toilet paper and or paper towels in the plastic container, keep the seeds in the envelope, seal those, and then any extra moisture kind of goes in there. When they do bring them in, they need to have the seeds labeled, because if they're just bringing us seed, especially when it gets to some of the cole crops, we're not going to be able to tell without growing them out. We do have the school gardens, And as Stacy mentioned, one of the things we're trying to do with our extra seeds is to make sure that we're funding all of these. The whole project is to reduce cost and to feed more people. So the more seed that we know what we've got, the better off we're going to be. We will want you to become familiar with all the documents that are here. I know a lot of times at the plant clinics there's free time, and so we would encourage you, as Stacy mentioned, you are going to be the face of the seed exchange, to get to know what the program is, and if you have any need for help or answers, like you're always encouraged to do, we've got everybody in the office, and feel free to ask for help. Other than that, I'm hoping this is a successful project, and we want it to grow every year, and we want you to be as involved as you would like to be. So, thank you.